On 5 News, the family of a man killed by a single punch speak out as his attacker is jailed. Oliver Dearlove's girlfriend says they wanted to have children. His mum describes their last moment together before he died from his injuries.
I just told him he was my special firstborn son, and that's how I said goodbye to him.
Also, a historic victory. Theresa May celebrates a Conservative by-election triumph in an area held by Labour for more than 80 years. But Jeremy Corbyn says it's not his fault. Saving the Red Squirrel, a new campaign is launched, so how can you help? And Hollywood star Hugh Jackman talks to us about repeatedly getting skin cancer and why some men avoid getting checked out.
I don't know why we sometimes prefer not to go to the doctor than to go and find out there's something wrong.
Welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. The mother of a man who was killed by a single punch says his family has been robbed of a future by an act of unprovoked violence. Oliver Dearlove was attacked in southeast London last August. His killer, Trevor Timon, admitted manslaughter earlier this week, and today he was sentenced to 6 years in jail. As Dominic Reynolds reports now, Oliver's mum and girlfriend have been speaking about their heartbreak and the man that they have lost.
He was very laid back, easygoing, a great future at work and a great future with Claire. He's lost out on all of that, and so have we, for no reason.
Oliver Dearlove's family have to imagine the life he might have lived. The 30-year-old was killed in a flash of anger by a man he'd never met. Trevor Timon. The single punch he threw at Oliver was unprovoked and senseless, a judge said today. 24 hours later, as his life support machine was switched off, Oliver's mum had to say goodbye.
We just talked to him, we just spoke to him. I just told him he was my special firstborn son, and that's how I said goodbye to him.
It happened as Oliver walked past this bar in southeast London last August. He struck up a conversation with a group of girls who were out with Trevor Timon. Before he attacked Oliver, he said, "I'll knock you out." The family were at the Old Bailey to hear Timon given a 6-year prison sentence for manslaughter today. He'll spend 5 years on licence. On Wednesday, he was found not guilty of murder. Hours before the attack, Oliver sent Claire the last text she'd ever received from him. It said, "I love you."
He was the one I was meant to have done all of that sort of thing with, you know, get married and have children and you know, sort of live a great life together, really.
And for his mum now, the aftermath of outliving her son.
When you get your children to the age of 30, you don't worry so much. They're not teenagers anymore. So it's a mighty blow.
Trevor Timon had a history of violent convictions, including punching a woman in the face. Oliver Dearlove's girlfriend told the court he was a true gentleman. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
Next, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, has been celebrating her party's historic result in the Copeland by-election. Their MP is the first Conservative to represent the area for more than 80 years, although Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has dismissed critics who say it's a reason for him to quit. He's been celebrating victory over UKIP in the by-election in Stoke, but as our political editor Andy Bell reports now, the biggest smiles came from the party in blue.
It's 35 years since a Prime Minister's been able to do this, go to a constituency where they've just taken a seat from the opposition in a by-election. No wonder Theresa May was eager to make the journey to Cumbria.
What I think we've seen from this victory is that this truly is a government that is working for everyone and for every part of the country. And that's the message that we bring here to Copeland and that we will take across the country.
That defeat has some in Labour again calling for Jeremy Corbyn to go, but he is concentrating on the other by-election of the night in Stoke-on-Trent, where Labour held on.
It's a message about the economy, it's a message about jobs, it's a message about this country, but above all, it was a message that hope triumphs over fear.
Earlier he'd been asked if he thought he might be the root of Labour's problem.
No.
Well, that settles that. His closest ally told us Jeremy Corbyn is the leader the country wants.
We want someone who's decent and honest. We don't want these macho manipulative leaders as we've seen in the past, and some of them in political parties today. They want someone who's indecent and honest, and I think that's why Jeremy Corbyn stands up to that concept of a new consensual new leader.
If Labour had some consolation in Stoke, there was none for UKIP. One of these men got a disappointing number of votes in the by-election. It's the one on the left.
I know everyone. What went wrong? What went wrong? I didn't get enough votes. Do you think you've let your party down?
Are you going to resign, Paul Nuttall?
No, of course not.
So after a tale of two by-elections, she has plenty to smile about, and he has a lot to think about.
Andy, let's get some perspective on this. By-elections are, of course, very different to general elections. The turnout in Stoke was a lot lower than the general election, for example. But what do last night's results really tell us?
Well, for Labour, let's start with them. First of all, the relatively good news, or if you like, the less bad news. Because they hung on in Stoke, because they beat UKIP there, they can stop this developing narrative, for now at least, that somehow Labour are going to get swept away in their heartlands by a sort of UKIP juggernaut. But the other lesson from the other by-election is that, quite frankly, at the moment, Labour are in no position to challenge Theresa May and the Conservatives in government. As for UKIP, they had a terrible night. Paul Nuttall, the new leader, really thought he could win there because of a strong Leave vote during the referendum. They've had a terrible campaign, and there really are questions about Paul Nuttall's future, and indeed the future of UKIP after the referendum. What is it there for? Finally, Theresa May and the Conservatives. She seems to me absolutely in control of the political scene as a result of these two by-elections, and as she goes into negotiations over Europe, she's going to be worrying far more about what people on the continent, the government she's going to have to negotiate with, what they're thinking and what her own party is thinking, rather than worrying about opposition parties.
Andy, thanks very much indeed. A woman who was killed by falling debris caused by Storm Doris yesterday has been named. Tani Martin was 29 and worked for the University of Wolverhampton. She died from head injuries after a piece of roofing fell on her in the city centre. And police in Malaysia say it's likely the North Korean leader's half-brother was killed by a poison that's classed as a weapon of mass destruction. They say that toxicology reports indicate that Kim Jong-nam died after having the nerve agent VX rubbed in his face. It was the footballing fairy tale, the underdogs of Leicester City beating all the odds to win the Premier League title. But now fans are coming to terms with an unhappy ending after manager Claudio Ranieri was sacked. The Italian was booted out last night to the shock and anger of many of the supporters. So how are they feeling now? Julian Drucker has been to Leicester to find out.
Where did it all go wrong?
The amazing Leicester City!
Leicester City and the Premier League's greatest ever story. The mastermind was manager Claudio Ranieri. 9 months on, the morning after his controversial dismissal, but he could still smile. He posed here with fans from his now former team. That shock decision meant a sombre press conference at the club earlier today.
We'll have to, we make sure we remember him. He'll get the utmost respect from everybody associated with the football club in what he's achieved. We know that people lose their jobs because of results, and ultimately the owners have made that decision.
After the highs came the lows this season. 1 point above the relegation zone, although still in the Champions League, Leicester City haven't even scored a goal in 2017. Reports suggest dressing room tensions, but former Leicester player Steve Walsh says a lack of goals was reason alone.
I'm looking at the domestic results, and they're not good enough. It's as simple as that. So I can feel the compassion for the owners of the football club, and I think they've made some very crucial decisions over the years, and they've got them right. So I pray that they have got this one right.
The streets of this city were alive with enthusiasm and excitement last summer. Now that change of fortune is inescapable.
I mean, we had the good times last season, we all know that, but that's gone now. You've just got to look forward to the next, staying in the Premiership.
I think it's bad. Because he's done a good job last year. I know it was 1 year only, but who knows? I think it was a bad decision.
You seem very emotional about it.
I am. Because to me, this city is as soon as you do something wrong, they're out you.
Solidarity came from Manchester United manager Jose Mourinho. Mr Ranieri's initials were emblazoned on his shirt earlier. He believes Leicester Stadium should be named after the visionary Italian who has left here so abruptly. Julian Drucker, 5 News, Leicester.
Tale of 2 seasons in the game of 2 halves. Coming up on 5 News. The new campaign to save the red squirrel from its rival, the grey. And we speak to Hugh Jackman after his treatment once again for skin cancer. Those stories coming up right here after the break. Welcome back to 5 News. Now, anyone who uses the NHS in England or works in it will know just how tough things have been getting recently. And today has brought new statistics that bear that out. Last month, the number of urgent operations that got cancelled reached the 3rd highest level since records began in 2010. Well, in the final 3 months of last year, bed occupancy rates were at their highest ever recorded level for that period of time. In 6 trusts, bed occupancy rates were over 99%, almost completely full. One of them was Milton Keynes University Hospital, which is where our health correspondent Catherine Jones has been.
With the snip of a ribbon, Milton Keynes Hospital opened 20 more beds this morning. So finally, there's space for Una, whose knee operation had been cancelled twice before because the hospital was too full.
This time, I was a little bit more apprehensive. Because I waited till 5 o'clock thinking I hope it won't be cancelled. But it's been well worth the wait and I'm in this lovely new wing now.
As well as finding the money to open a new ward, Milton Keynes also needs to find the staff to look after the patients here. And as there's a national shortage of nurses, that means the hospital has to work hard to attract people to work here rather than elsewhere.
That means for now the sister is filling the rota with staff from other wards and agency nurses.
The salary is the salary, but it's, hopefully you've got a nice new working area like this might be the sort of thing that might attract somebody to come and want to work at Milton Keynes Hospital.
Winter pressures have been intense here, but this ward is not a response to that. It's actually part of a long-term plan to cope with a fast expanding local population.
Acute beds are not a solution to the pressures that the NHS is under at the moment. We know that investment in community services, mental health and social care will free up acute hospital beds, and it's that investment that will drive better acute performance.
This hospital is lucky. The town it serves is growing, and long-term plans for that handily provide short-term solutions to its beds crisis. Many other hospitals are also at their limits, but without the resource to do anything about it. Catherine Jones, 5 News, Milton Keynes.
Now, the Royal Bank of Scotland has announced its latest annual results, and once again, they are pretty dire. Last year, it lost more than £7 billion, meaning that since the taxpayer bailed out RBS 9 years ago, it's lost more than £50 billion. And we still own around 70% of the bank. Simon Vargas here now. And Simon, RBS is talking about £2 billion of cost cutting. So what does that mean for jobs and the high street branches many people still use?
Well, I'm afraid it means thousands more job losses, 10,000 according to the union. This also involves NatWest, who are part of the group. And it's a bit like Groundhog Day, this story. It's every year now. The man who's clearing up the mess is not the man who made the mess. That's Ross McEwen, who I met up with today. He's still taking a bonus, which he's refused in recent years. And he wouldn't go into specifics on the job numbers.
Well, jobs will come out of the organisation. I've been very open about that, but I have never put a number out there because A, we don't know what that number is, and 2, we always talk to our staff first before we make any announcements.
Well, they're paying him a pretty penny, a salary of many millions, Simon, but the bank has actually lost $58 billion since it was bailed out by the taxpayer, as I said. Why is it simply losing so much money?
Well, they're still clearing up the mess. £10 billion worth in the last year, they reckon, paying fines in America, restructuring they're being forced to do here. But he says it is getting better. There will still probably be a loss next year in the results in a year's time, so Groundhog Day again, but he says it is getting better.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Now, could you help save one of Britain's best-loved animals? The red squirrel has been declining for decades as a result of disease and disappearing habitats. And conservationists say that grey squirrels are doing a lot of that harm. They're calling for drastic measures against them. And as Ruth Liptrot reports now, they also want an army of volunteers to help ride to the rescue.
Of all of our native wildlife, this little guy has to be one of our favourites. As we know, though, the red squirrel is in decline. There are only 140,000 left in the UK, but 2.5 million greys.
So everyone gives the grey squirrel a bad press. Is he out to get the red squirrel? Is it deliberate what he's doing, do you think?
No, unfortunately the grey squirrel carries a disease called parapox virus, which is lethal to these little chaps, but the greys are immune.
Yeah.
Also, they're much bigger, they're more aggressive, and they are general feeders, where this little chap is a selective feeder.
The good news, though, is that you might be able to do something to help, because the Wildlife Trusts want to create a red squirrel army.
The Wildlife Trusts are organising it, and they want to get 5,000 people to actually help and volunteer. Yes. And they will feed red squirrels at feeders. They'll help with remote cameras so we can see what the red squirrels are doing. They'll take data. They'll explain to children how important red squirrels are. So yes. We've really got to get it out there that these are so lovely and we need to protect them.
But these little fellas were determined to make us fall in love with them just that little bit more.
I can't believe how confident he is. I mean, whenever you get sent out on an animal story, you never get anywhere near them. Not today.
And then he got a bit too confident.
He's going to put me tights.
That's all right.
Ah, well, tights are 10 a penny. Red squirrels, not so much.
Well, this is the iconic red squirrel. This is Squirrel Nutkin from, obviously, Beatrix Potter. And this is the creature that should be here. Yeah, yes. When I was a boy, at the end of the war, about 1948, I saw a red squirrel in my garden in South London. That was in 1948. Now they've all gone. It's important that we save them, do everything we can to save them.
Well, I'm doing my bit because I'm feeding him his lunch.
So I don't know about you, but I'm off to join the Squirrel Army, because if we don't, in 35 years, they could be gone. Ruth Liptrot, 5 News.
A Red Army, no less. If you want to know how you can help, Nigel Marvin, who you saw there in Ruth's report, has been giving tips on our Facebook page. Just search for C5 News. Finally, Hugh Jackman has been speaking about his latest fight against skin cancer and how at first he'd been reluctant to get it checked out. The Hollywood star has just seen off the disease for the 6th time, but he says if it wasn't for his wife, he might not have gone to the doctor at all. He also told Minnie Stevenson how he really feels about walking away from Wolverine.
Mutants. They're gone now.
Hugh Jackman returns as the stoic but flawed superhero Wolverine in the new X-Men movie Logan.
To see if I still...
But behind the scenes, the star has been fighting his own very personal battle with skin cancer. Earlier this month, the Golden Globe winner shared a photo on Instagram, still wearing the bandage from surgery after having a growth removed. It's the 6th time the actor has been treated for the disease. Ahead of the release of his new film, I spoke to Hugh about how he handled the news.
One of the themes in the film is Wolverine talking, kind of not really engaging with his health. You have been engaging really fully with your health. Do you think men don't talk enough about their health?
Well, this man is not very good about it. The first skin cancer I had for quite a long time, and really took my wife, like, go get it checked. I'm like, that's nothing, it's fine. I don't know what it is. I don't want to say men, because probably not all men, but some men that I know, I don't know why we sometimes prefer not to go to the doctor than to go and find out there's something wrong. I just prefer not to, let's just ignore that one.
And how are you feeling now? Are you feeling good?
Fine, yeah, I'm good. No, yeah, it looks like something, but it's not really. It's just, there's actually nothing there. I just like a little bit of sympathy occasionally.
Fair enough.
Typical actor.
Nearly 20 years ago, Wolverine was the role which turned Aussie Hugh Jackman into one of Hollywood's most famous. But the star says this film will be his last as the superhero.
Are you ready to retire Wolverine? Can you really let it go?
I'm ready.
Can you? You're, thespians. Can they ever let go of this stuff?
No, I'll be talking about it for the rest of my life. I'll be playing them on a loop in my home. But the actual playing it, no, I'm ready. I think I knew that a couple of years ago.
And while we're on the topic of retiring Jackman's Wolverine, we had to ask...
Never retire?
Acting is fun.
Just keep going?
No.
There'll be no golf course,
I was doing
pina
it when I was-
colada, move into local politics?
There will be golfing movies that I'll be doing. Very interesting. I can see 9 movies about that very famous golfer on the seniors tour.
Perfect.
I mean,
highly paid.
Highly paid, he thought he was down and out. He was a caddy.
Logan may be Jackman's last outing as Wolverine, but don't expect Hugh's heroic acting skills to be retired anytime soon. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Just seems like such a nice guy, doesn't he, Hugh Jackman, talking there to our Minnie. That's almost it for me for now, but I'll be back at 6:30 with 5 News tonight. We'll have more in-depth look, in fact, at the death of the North Korean leader's half-brother. Officials now say that Kim Jong-nam was killed by a nerve agent in this airport. I'll be talking to a chemical weapons expert about that. We'll also hear from the director of a new film about George Best, and I'll be asking him what it tells us that we didn't already know about the damaged genius of the footballing legend. But that's it for now. Chris Page has the weather next. I'll see you again in an hour. Bye-bye.